The second you explain yourself, you've already lost. That might sound harsh, but Machiavelli would nod in agreement. You probably think you're doing the right thing, being honest, being clear, maybe even being respectful. You believe that if you explain your reasoning, if you lay it out in simple terms, people will give you the benefit of the doubt, that they'll back off, understand your intentions, and treat you fairly. But they won't. Because explaining doesn't earn respect, it gives away leverage. Every time you explain yourself, you hand someone a map to your mind. You show them where the lines are drawn, what frustrates you, what scares you, what you desperately need them to get. And now they have something far more valuable than your trust. They have your emotional blueprint. The truth is, when someone sees that you need to be understood, they instantly know how to control you. They don't have to overpower you, they just have to keep you talking. You might not realize it, but most of the time, explaining is a reaction to fear. The fear of being judged, mislabeled, or misunderstood. You explain yourself so they don't think you're selfish. You justify a decision so they don't see you as cold. You overclarify because someone might think you're arrogant. But every time you do that, you're not actually fixing the problem, you're submitting to it. Machiavelli would call that a fatal mistake. See, in the world of power, perception is not something you chase. It's something you create on your terms. The moment you defend yourself, you step into someone else's frame. Their misunderstanding becomes your priority. Their confusion becomes your problem. And worst of all, their opinion becomes your emotional boss. Let's make one thing clear. Explaining is not the same as communicating. Communication is decisive. Communication is control. Explanation, on the other hand, is desperation dressed as politeness. When you explain, you're not just sharing your thoughts, you're pleading to be seen in a certain light. It sounds like this, I didn't mean it that way. I hope you understand. I just wanted to be clear. But underneath all of that is a silent message, please still like me. Machiavelli didn't care about being liked. He understood the deeper truth: mystery is stronger than precision. Because when people can't figure you out, they can't pin you down. When you stop explaining, you become the question they keep asking themselves. And that's real power. Let's take it to a real-life scenario. Someone asks you for a favor. You say no. They ask why. Your instinct: oh, it's just not a good time right now. I've got a lot going on, maybe next week. I hope that's okay. Sounds harmless, but what you've really done is start a negotiation. Now they have a foothold. What if I help you first? What if it's just for 5 minutes? What if we do it another day? Suddenly your boundary is open for discussion. But imagine this: they ask why not, and you simply smile and say, because I chose not to. Nothing to push, no explanation, no way in, just a wall. That's not rudeness, that's Machiavellian restraint. This same principle applies in conflict. Someone accuses you unfairly. They twist the facts, press for answers. You feel cornered, and you want to explain, to defend, to correct them. But the more you talk, the more you lose the upper hand. Because now you're reacting to them. Now you're on their timeline, in their frame, trying to fix something that only exists in their mind. The king doesn't explain why he sits on the throne. The general doesn't explain why he ordered the strike. And the wolf doesn't explain why it left the pack. They move, they act, and others interpret. Machiavelli would tell you that letting others interpret you is the real game. Because in their guessing, you remain untouchable. And while they're stuck wondering what you really meant, you've already made your next move. There's another reason why silence is so powerful: it reveals people. When you don't explain yourself, people start filling in the blanks. And how they fill them in, that's data. Psychological intel. Do they get insecure? Angry, defensive? Do they chase, or do they retreat? All of that tells you exactly how they operate under stress. Silence is a test, and their response is a confession. That's what makes Machiavelli's philosophy more than just a theory. It's a tool set, a weapon, a radar system for truth. But here's where most people trip up. They think they're being kind by explaining. That clarity will build trust. That transparency is a virtue. And sure, in some settings, with loved ones, with allies, it can be. But in the real world of power and persuasion, over-explaining doesn't create clarity. It creates cracks. Every time you explain yourself, you give away another piece of the puzzle. And the more pieces you hand out, the easier it is to be played. You think you're being thoughtful, but people start thinking you're insecure. You think you're being transparent, but now they see your triggers. You think you're being fair, but now you've just made your values a group project. And Machiavelli would never allow that. Because once people realize they can shape how you're seen, they'll never stop. They won't overpower you. They'll outtalk you. So what should you do? Say less, pause longer, let silence do its work. When someone pressures you for an answer, don't give them one. When someone says, "Why'd you say that?" respond with, "I said what I meant." When someone demands clarity, say you're free to interpret it however you need to. And watch what happens. The air gets heavier, the tension rises, and you stay unmoved. That's the Machiavellian advantage. You're not playing defense anymore. You're holding frame. You're no longer trying to be understood, you're letting them wonder. Because the person who doesn't play the game makes the rules. Here's where most people make the mistake: they think silence is weak. That if they don't explain, they'll look guilty or cold or arrogant. That they'll be misunderstood, and the misunderstanding will somehow define them forever. But Machiavelli would laugh at that idea. Because being misunderstood isn't a weakness, it's a shield. When people don't quite know what to make of you, they're on edge. When you don't give them the answers they want, they start making up stories, and most of the time, those stories are more flattering than the truth. Why? Because people project their own fears, desires, and insecurities into the silence. And in doing that, they reveal more about themselves than they ever will about you. Let's break that down. You pull away from someone. They notice. They confront you. Did I do something wrong? You don't explain. You don't justify. You just say, "I noticed a few things. That's all." Then you leave it hanging. That moment right there that will haunt them. They'll replay conversations. Dig through old texts. Ask mutual friends. Invent theories. Try to fix things they don't even understand because they can't tolerate the tension of not knowing. And all you did was stay quiet. That's strategic silence. It's not about punishing, it's about observing. And while they panic in the fog of uncertainty, you gather data. You find out how they handle pressure, how they deal with rejection, how desperate they are to get back into your good graces. That's information, and information is power. The problem with explaining yourself is that it makes people think your decisions are open to negotiation, that your no might become a maybe, that your direction can be reversed if they just push the right emotional button. And once they figure out where that button is, they'll press it every time. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that power doesn't come from accuracy. It comes from conviction. When you act with certainty and say little, people assume you must have your reasons. And if they don't know what those reasons are, they make them up, usually assuming the best, because uncertainty makes people hopeful. But the moment you start explaining, you break that illusion. You give them the full picture, and suddenly they realize there's nothing special going on. Just your average insecure person trying to be understood. That's why Machiavelli avoided explaining, not because he lacked answers, but because giving them would lower his altitude. Look around. You'll see this everywhere. A powerful CEO doesn't jump on Zoom to explain every policy change. World leaders don't go on Instagram Live to unpack why they made a controversial decision. Apex predators don't stop mid-hunt to clarify their intentions. Why? Because explanation is exposure. It's a form of emotional undressing. The more you talk, the easier it is to poke holes in your logic. The more detail you share, the more chances someone has to disagree. It's like playing chess with all your pieces turned upside down. The opponent can see every move, every weakness, every strategy. That's not leadership, that's a sacrifice. Now let's get brutally honest. Most of the time, when you explain yourself, it's not even for the other person. It's for you. It's your own discomfort you're trying to soothe. You're not clarifying to help them, you're begging them not to misjudge you. You're saying, "Please don't think I'm cold. Please don't hate me. Please still see me as a good person." But if someone can guilt you into explaining, they can guilt you into doing almost anything. That's why Machiavelli cultivated ambiguity. He didn't let people read him easily. He didn't clarify every step. He didn't need people to agree with his choices. Because the people who really have power aren't the ones who are understood. They're the ones who are feared, respected, or misunderstood in a way that works in their favor. Let's go back to a simple tactic. Someone says, "You're acting different." Most people would say, "Oh yeah, just been busy," or "Sorry, I've had a lot on my mind." You say yes, and nothing else. That creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, their own thoughts echo. Their own insecurity gets louder. Their mind races trying to fill in the blanks. They don't just hear your silence. They feel it. And here's the truth. Most people can't stomach the strongest response to confrontation isn't a counter-argument. It's calm. You don't need to match their energy. You don't need to meet their emotion with your own. You don't even need to set the record straight. All you need to do is not take the bait. And Machiavelli would remind you, the minute you do take the bait, you're no longer leading. You're chasing, you're reacting, you're dancing to their rhythm instead of setting your own. Here's another tactic: reverse the pressure. They ask, "Why did you do that?" You respond, "Why does it matter to you?" Now they're explaining, now they're vulnerable, and you're just watching. That's not being cold. That's being calculated. That's holding frame. That's shifting from defense to offense without even raising your voice. You're not trying to win an argument, you're letting them lose their grip. And maybe someone will call it manipulative. Let them. Because manipulation is often just another word for strategy done well. And when it comes to control, timing is everything. You explain at the wrong moment, you give up your edge. You hold silence at the right moment, you own the room. So here's your next move. The next time you feel that familiar urge to explain, pause. Don't react. Don't rush to clarify. Let the tension build. And realize that your need to be understood is often your biggest vulnerability. Because in the end, power doesn't come from being seen clearly. It comes from being felt and feared even when no one can fully read you. The truth is, the more you explain, the more you become explainable. And that's not a compliment. It means people can predict you. They can plan around you. They can start testing your edges like they're checking the fences of a zoo enclosure. And once someone knows where your boundaries end, they start asking why the walls are even there. That's how people chip away at your frame. Not through force, but through familiarity. By dragging you into debates you didn't ask for. By making your identity a committee discussion. By slowly convincing you to hand over control, not with power, but with polite questions. Machiavelli would call this the slow dethroning. You don't notice it's happening because it's not loud. It doesn't look like defeat. It looks like a conversation. Someone says, "Hey, I think you came off a little harsh there." You respond, "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to be clear." Congratulations, now your tone is on the table. Next time they'll ask you to soften it. After that, they'll suggest you run it by them first. Now your communication style is theirs to edit. Your authority is up for grabs. And it all started with that one little sentence, "I didn't mean to." Think about how real power operates. Does the president stop to explain every executive order? Do elite generals clarify their troop movements to their enemies? Do lions justify why they hunted? No, they move, they act, they decide. When they do speak, it's brief, final, unapologetic. And that's what makes it powerful, because it leaves no open door. There's nothing to push against, nothing to dissect. It is what it is. Take it or don't. That's the kind of energy Machiavelli advocated for. Not just dominance, but decisiveness. Not just confidence, but mystery. Because people don't challenge what they don't understand. They hesitate. They self-edit. They walk on eggshells. Not because you threaten them, but because they don't know how far you'll go. That's what silence does. It builds a fog. And inside that fog, people stop trying to correct you and start trying to please you. Let's say someone accuses you of being distant. Most people rush to explain, "I've just been tired. It's not you, I've had a lot going on." But now they know exactly what to expect. They know your rhythm. They know how to pull you back in. And worst of all, they know you'll always make time to explain yourself, even if it means bending your own needs. Flip it. They say you're distant. You reply, "That's possible." Then nothing. No correction, no comfort, no roadmap. Now they're in the fog. They have to sit in the feeling they just tried to project onto you. And in that silence, something strange happens. They start adjusting themselves. They get more polite. They tread more carefully. They try to earn your warmth again, because now it's not a guarantee. That's psychological gravity, and it only forms when you resist the urge to clarify. Here's the deeper truth: people trust confidence more than accuracy. If you say something with calm conviction and stop talking, they assume you know something they don't. But if you say something and then spend 5 minutes defending it, clarifying it, adding footnotes to it, they start doubting it. Not because it was wrong, but because you treated it like it needed defending. Even a flawless explanation feels weaker than a confident statement followed by silence. Machiavelli understood this. He knew that explaining too much wasn't just bad politics, it was bad psychology. Because the second someone senses that you need to be understood, they stop taking you seriously. You become negotiable. Your identity becomes negotiable. Your choices become negotiable. Your emotions become negotiable. Suddenly your no becomes a well maybe. Your this is who I am becomes here's why I'm like this. And Machiavelli would warn you never make your essence a debate. Because once people think they can vote on your boundaries, your power has already started leaking out of the room. So how do you stop this? You practice the art of the dead-end statement. Short, calm, final. That's how I operate. I said what I meant. I made my decision. These aren't conversation starters. They're closures. And if someone pushes back, you don't get louder, you get colder. Because the moment you feel the need to convince them, they're no longer listening. They're just collecting ammo. That's why Machiavellians don't defend. They decide, they don't clarify, they redirect, they don't argue, they observe. And the more someone pushes, the more still they become. Not as punishment, but as message, I'm not available for negotiation. That sentence not said out loud, but embodied, is more powerful than any verbal counterattack. Let's talk tactics. Next time someone asks you, why did you do that, don't give them a story. Give them a sentence. Or better yet, ask them a question. Why does that matter to you? Now you've flipped the frame. Now they're explaining. Now they're vulnerable. Now they're exposed. You've shifted the spotlight without ever raising your voice. Machiavelli didn't chase clarity. He made people work for it. And in doing so, he made his presence something others adjusted to, not something he constantly had to explain. That's the secret. When people can't quite figure you out, they start respecting you more. Not because they agree with you, but because they can't locate your weaknesses. They stop asking questions because the answers aren't guaranteed. They stop pressing because pressure doesn't move you. They stop controlling because you don't offer handles. You've removed the levers. You've closed the access points. You've taken back your frame. And suddenly you're not just someone they talk to. You're someone they orbit around. Let's talk about predictability, the silent assassin of power. The more predictable you are, the more you're controllable. People don't need to defeat you. They just need to anticipate you. If they know how you'll respond when they misunderstand you, if they know you'll always explain yourself when accused or defend yourself when challenged, then you're already conquered. Machiavelli warned against this trap. He understood that once people can map your emotional patterns, they can outmaneuver you not with force, but with timing. They don't need to overpower you. They just need to keep you talking. That's the difference between deniability and ambiguity. Deniability means someone suspects what you're doing but can't prove it. Ambiguity. It means they don't even know what to suspect. And that's the most powerful space to live in when your motives, your reasons, your next move are all wrapped in silence. Not because you don't know, but because you don't need them to. You ever notice how powerful people can say so little and yet dominate an entire room? It's not an accident. It's design. They've learned the art of withholding, of letting others react while they observe. Because once someone is reacting to you, you've already won the frame. Here's a brutal truth that most people never learn. Explaining yourself never actually fixes judgment. People don't believe you because you explained. They believe you because your presence made them question their doubts. You don't gain respect by clearing every misunderstanding. You gain it when you don't flinch in the face of one. That's how you make silence speak louder than words. Picture this, you're confronted. Someone accuses you of bad intent, miscommunication, arrogance, whatever. You know the instinct, jump in, clear it up. Make sure they don't get the wrong idea. But what if you didn't? What if you just looked at them calm, grounded, and said nothing? What if your stillness did more damage than their loudest accusation? That's not avoidance, that's control. Because silence isn't a lack of response, it is the response. And in that moment, it says, I'm not here to make you comfortable. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't owe you my mind. Machiavelli would call this calculated ambiguity, the refusal to be pinned down, not out of fear, but out of strength. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you choose when and how and why with surgical precision. So next time someone says, so what did you mean by that? Remember, this is your moment of truth. The weak man panics. He clarifies. He fumbles for the right phrasing. But the Machiavellian doesn't break. He watches. He lets the other person squirm in their confusion. Because when they need to ask what you meant, you already have the upper hand. They're searching. You're still. They're interpreting. You're unshaken. They're trying to pull you in and you've already stepped over them. That's the final power of not explaining. You become a question they can't answer, a story they can't finish, a sentence that keeps echoing after the conversation ends. And that's where real respect lives, not in clarity but in mystery. Think about the people you can't stop thinking about, the ones who stayed in your mind long after the interaction ended. Chances are they didn't overshare. They didn't explain every move. They didn't try to win your approval. They left you wondering, and that wondering created gravity. Not because they had more answers, but because they withheld them. In a world addicted to clarity, the one who resists becomes magnetic. Most people can't stand being misunderstood. They panic at the thought that someone might get the wrong impression. They explain every emotion, justify every decision, unpack every detail. But here's what Machiavelli knew: the one who lets people get it wrong on purpose is always 10 steps ahead. Because while they're debating your motives, you're already reshaping the outcome. You're not defending your last move, you're already on the next one. This is how control is built. Not by being seen, but by being felt. Not by being liked, but by being respected or feared or misunderstood on your terms. Machiavelli didn't need to win arguments. He didn't need to be liked. He didn't need to be the most agreeable man in the room. He needed one thing: to stay untouchable. And he understood that explanation is a crack in the armor. It's a tremor in your stance. It shows you've been rattled. And once someone sees that, they know where to push again. So what does the dangerous man do instead? He doesn't explain. He redirects. He doesn't defend. He decides. He doesn't argue. He moves. And when people try to corner him, the colder he becomes. Not out of cruelty, but out of message. You are not entitled to my clarity, and I am not available for negotiation. That message is louder than any paragraph you could offer. Because it communicates something far deeper than logic. It communicates value. You're not saying, I don't care what you think. You're saying, what I'm building is too focused, too important, too unshakable to stop and explain it to you. And in that moment, you teach people how to treat you, not through explanation, but through energy. Here's a tactical tip: stop explaining to people who haven't earned it. If someone demands answers but hasn't earned your trust, they're not looking for understanding. They're looking for leverage. Don't give it to them. When you do speak, make it short, sharp, final. That's how I operate. I've made my choice. I said what I said. Each sentence is a wall, not a doorway. It ends the conversation instead of extending it. And if they push again, you shift the spotlight. Why does this matter to you? What's really behind your question? Now they're the one justifying. Now they're exposed, and you're simply observing. Because silence is not the absence of strength, it's the proof of it. Now let's flip the whole frame. Let's say you do explain yourself. You crack open your mind, you give them access, you walk them through your thought process, your motives, your emotions. What happens? You shrink. Maybe not physically, but psychologically you shrink in their eyes. You invite them in. You offer them the crown. Not to wear it, but just to prove you're not a tyrant. But once it's off your head, it's never fully yours again. Machiavelli would call this the self-inflicted dethroning. You handed over your position just to show you're reasonable. And now that they've seen your reasons, they no longer see your strength. They see a negotiable man. Someone who can be talked down, worn down, or pulled apart piece by piece if they just push hard enough. You've just given them permission to critique not just your decision, but your worldview. And here's the thing: people will take that permission. Not because you were wrong, but because you gave them the right to question you. And once someone believes they have that right, they'll never stop using it. Look at the most dominant figures in the world. Political leaders, high-stakes CEOs, street-level bosses, even the cold-blooded strategist in your friend group. Do they explain themselves? Rarely. And when they do, it's not to clarify, it's to declare. They speak in conclusions, not justifications. They say, this is what's happening, not let me walk you through why I did this. Because when you constantly explain your every move, it doesn't make you look thoughtful, it makes you look uncertain. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. Insecurity has a scent, and it spreads like blood in water. And once people smell it, they circle back again and again to test your frame. They say things like, are you sure about that? Isn't that a little harsh? Wouldn't it make more sense if... And if you keep explaining, you've just taught them that they set the boundaries of your confidence. So what's more effective than a well-rehearsed explanation? A shift in energy. Someone says, you're being distant. Don't soften, don't reassure. Respond with more distance. Let them feel it. Someone says you've changed. Don't explain the change. Look them in the eye and say, yes. No punctuation, no story, no escape route. Let them sit with it. That moment when you hold frame instead of surrendering to their discomfort, that's where psychological dominance lives. Because now you're not explaining who you are. You're embodying it. You've become a mirror. And when people look into that mirror, what they see isn't your weakness, it's their own reflection. Their need for answers, their hunger for reassurance, their inability to sit with uncertainty. And suddenly the power dynamic flips. You're no longer reacting to their confusion, they're reacting to your calm. And this is what most people never understand about power. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it says nothing at all. We're not talking about being cold just to be edgy. This isn't about withholding for ego. This is about restraint for control. Machiavelli didn't stay silent because he had nothing to say. He stayed silent because he knew exactly what the cost of saying it would be. Explanation reveals pattern. Pattern reveals weakness. Weakness invites attack. It's not about hiding, it's about preserving. Every time you explain yourself, you teach people how to reach you, how to talk you into or out of things. And the man who can be talked out of his stance, he's not powerful. He's predictable. And Machiavelli's ultimate warning. Predictability is the beginning of defeat, because when they know what'll rattle you, they'll rattle you. When they know what you need to defend, they'll question it. When they know how far you'll go to be understood, they'll weaponize your need to be clear. There's an old phrase in diplomacy, deniability is power. But Machiavelli would raise the stakes even higher. Ambiguity is greater. Deniability means someone suspects something but can't prove it. Ambiguity means they don't even know what to suspect. That fog, that space of psychological uncertainty, it isn't weakness, it's armor. Because people can't attack what they can't define. They can't hit a target that keeps changing shape. Here's the final brutal lesson: explaining yourself doesn't fix judgment. People don't suddenly start respecting you because you were articulate. They don't stop testing you because you were logical. They stop because your silence left them unsure and your presence left them impressed. That's what Machiavelli knew. That's what most people miss. So how do you train this in the real world? Start here, cut 50% of your explanations. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. When someone asks, why did you do that, don't launch into backstory. Say, because I decided to. When they press for more, don't give them logic. Give them energy. When they say, help me understand, respond with, you'll figure it out. You don't need to be rude. You don't need to attack. You just need to stop treating understanding as a right other people are entitled to. Because once you do, your identity becomes a battlefield, and your power becomes a group discussion. Let them misunderstand you, intentionally. It's not a bug, it's a strategy. A rare skill. Controlled misinterpretation. You know they're wrong. You let them stay wrong. Because while they're distracted by the wrong interpretation, you're already 5 moves ahead. When they finally realize what you were really doing, it's too late. You've already won. And when you move like that, unreadable, unbothered, undeniable, no one dares to corner you. Because they know they can't. So here's what you've learned, not just a tactic, not just a quote from an old political philosopher, but a mindset shift. A complete recalibration of how you carry yourself in a world addicted to explanations. You're not here to explain. You're not here to justify. You're not here to make sure everyone gets it. You are here to move. With clarity, with force, with mystery. Because the man who explains himself too much becomes a manual. Easy to read, easy to skim, easy to throw away. But the man who holds silence, he becomes a riddle. He becomes gravity. He becomes something others cannot decode, and that's exactly why they respect him. So next time they press you with questions, next time they ask, what did you mean by that? Next time you feel that rising pressure in your chest, that twitch to make everything right, that urge to be liked, understood, accepted, don't give in. Pause. Breathe. Say less. Say nothing. Let them stew in the tension. Let them invent their own explanations. Let them talk in circles while you walk in straight lines. Because in a world of endless commentary, the man who stays quiet on purpose becomes legendary. Be that man. Be unreadable. Be untouchable. Be the one who doesn't need to explain. Because he already knows who he is. End of script. Have a beautiful day.